Hello, everyone, and happy holidays, happy end of the year, etc., etc. I'm here today with a recap and review of my best reading of 2020. This year has been my readingest year in history. I've read just over 60 books this year, which for me is exceptional. And given the circumstances, I'll probably never read that many more books again in a single year. I've just had a lot of great opportunities while I've been pretty much quarantining this year to read a lot of books, especially listening to audiobooks, which is the main form that I've been consuming my books this year. Before I go any further, I'm just going to quickly say that there's a lot I want to cover in sort of my year in review. And since I don't want to have really long videos, I'm going to split this video into 3 different parts. In part 1, this one, I'll start with a short, high-level recap of the specific genres I've been reading this year and a little bit of reflection on the overall diversity, inclusion, representation in my reading for the year. Then in part 2, I'll talk about my biggest disappointments of the year. And if you're not interested in that, you can skip right ahead to part 3, where I'm going to start with first some honorable mention books that I really enjoyed, and then move on to the top 10 books of 2020, which are all going to be books that I highly recommend for anyone. And now, part of the inspiration this year that kept me consistently reading was that I discovered and started following a lot of Booktube channels while quarantining, which is really fun and inspired me to make actually some book reviews of my own up here. Some of those are fairly bigger channels that have been around for kind of a while, like Ashley at Climb the Stacks, also Ashley at Bookish Realm, Rincey with Rincey Reads, and Seji at Artisan Geek, Jesse, Bowties in Books, and Jean at Bookish Thoughts, and Claire with Claire Reads Books. There have also been a couple of smaller or newer channels that have caught my attention recently, including Locked Booktition, Luxurious Blue, Alex Black Reads, and Lil's Vintage World. I'll link all these channels below. They cover a good variety of topics, but I'm always looking for more stuff to check out, so hopefully I'll discover some more in the coming year. So I did just a bit of reflection on exactly what I've been reading this year, and that includes some new topics, some old favorites, and other timely topics. It was once again another good year for mysteries for me, particularly for my go-to author, Agatha Christie, although I've started thinking a little bit more about how to branch out to other authors, because there are certainly a lot of other styles out there than just Agatha Christie's. I think I counted 11 mysteries that I finished this year. I also read a number of classic novels that have been around for a really long time, and a little bit of more modern literary fiction. I'll talk about all of these later. One genre that I used to enjoy quite a bit, but haven't been reading a lot lately, that I kind of got back to a little bit this year, was sci-fi and fantasy. Some of the favorite books that I read in these genres are Ender's Game and Game of Thrones, which are both pretty well-known ones in the genre. But I've certainly been looking into some lesser universally known sci-fi and fantasy novels, and would like to read more of those next year. I think my biggest new endeavor, though, this year has been listening to quite a few historical and or political books, which traditionally hasn't really been my type of reading. My gateway into this world was the wonderful historical fiction book, A Gentleman in Moscow, quite possibly my absolute favorite book of the year, and I'll talk about that one later in the section where I talk about my favorites. This book isn't really about the history in the years after the Russian Revolution, but it takes place during that time, and the main character finds himself entangled in a world that inherently involves the politics and social situations in the world evolving around him. So I'll talk a bit more about this excellent book later, but basically my lack of knowledge about really any of the historical events going on in this book led me then to search for a book about Russian history. So naturally I chose the 50-plus hour recording A People's Tragedy by Orlando Fuchs, because I've got to get the most bang for my buck with that Audible subscription, and it's still just one credit. And this book was also highly recommended online by a lot of sources, and it did not disappoint. I not only learned a ton about the fascinating Russian history in the years leading up to and right until the revolutions of 1917, but I also picked up on a lot of more broadly relevant conversations about the relationship of social classes, ethnic divisions, and political philosophies in shaping a society, and the factors and obstacles that either lead to or prevent societal change. But more than that even, I enjoyed this book so much that I decided it was worth learning not only more about Russian history, but about other countries as well, including even some history of the United States where I live. which then led me into a little bit of political reading as well. So then another factor that encouraged me to learn a little bit more about the history, particularly in the United States, was the protests for racial equality that occurred this June and moving forward. I had a lot of good discussions during this time and listened to a lot of podcasts on the topic, and this led me not only to listen to some modern anti-racism books that I'm sure many of you saw recommended, and I'll mention some more of these later, but also a few excellent history books about race in the US, including Michelle Alexander's The New Jim Crow, which I definitely recommend. I was also inspired to listen to Ibram X. Kendi's Stamped from the Beginning. Unfortunately, I didn't finish it by the time I had to return it to the library, but I was really enjoying, well, I don't know if enjoying is really the right word for the topic that it's about, but I thought it was really good from the first few hours that I had listened to. I think I made it about a quarter of the way through. So it's definitely one that I plan on getting back to soon, and kind of conditionally recommend that one since I haven't actually read the whole thing. This brings up another point for reflection on this year's reading, which is that the whole Booktube community not only exposed me to a wider variety of genres, in general, but also a lot of discussions about reading diversely, or at least being conscious about what sorts of authors and what topics most easily hit the top of the bestseller lists, and thinking about that when I kind of just decide absent-mindedly to pick up whatever book I heard about because it's the New York Times #1 or something like that. Looking back on my year of reading, I see that I did read quite a few books by Black authors, many of which I really enjoyed. I did notice, though, just from thinking about it a little, that a lot of the Black authors I've read have been dealing with more serious topics, with at least half of these books being nonfiction, as well as a few fiction ones like Homegoing, by Ya Jesse, or The Nickel Boys by Colson Whitehead, that still heavily deal with the topic of race and racial conflict, or even some of the ones that are less specifically about racial conflict, like Children of Blood and Bone or New Kid. So having listened to some good YouTube discussions about this, as well as a great 2021 coming attractions list that just came out recently by Ashley at the Bookish Realm, which I'll link below. And that was full of stuff by Black authors covering pretty much the whole gamut of possible topics, from serious to fun to sad to romance novels, if that's what you're looking for. I definitely like to work this coming year on trying harder not to let white authors be my fun reads and Black authors be my serious or heavy reads, even though it's certainly okay to read some of each by anyone. I will say I wasn't quite as good about reading stuff written by other people of color, or even just hearing other voices from traditionally underprivileged communities. There are a lot of such books that I have on my radar, but not so much that I actually completed recently, which is something I'm going to have to work on when I choose which book I am going to read next. I did read There by the native author Tommy Orange, which was a short but moving read that I think some have described as more like a collection of related short stories than a plot-driven novel. I'll talk about that one in the part about my favorite reads of the year. And I also read The Brief and Wondrous Life of Oscar Wilde by Junot Diaz, which I enjoyed, but maybe not as much as I hear most other readers did. Again, though, I think this is an area that I'd like to work on more for next year. Similarly, I wasn't the best with reading LGBTQ plus books. The only one that I know for sure that I read in this area was the romance novel Red, White, and Royal Blue, which I didn't really enjoy, and this further just underscores that I could do a lot better in this area, since obviously there's got to be a lot of stuff out there that I really would enjoy. I did manage to keep a pretty even gender balance in what I was reading, with roughly even representation of male and female authors, and protagonists in the novels as well. But I would like to hear a few more transgender or non-binary perspectives too, because this is an area that has received a lot of attention, obviously, recently, and it's a community that is definitely under attack, but I just know very little about the experiences of transgender folks, so I think it's something that I'd like to learn more about, and hopefully I will share some of that in this coming year. And finally, in terms of target audiences, I mostly read adult books, although I did pick up a few good young adult novels and some middle grade books that I read together with some local middle schoolers for a tutoring summer reading program kind of thing that I did. I would certainly like to check out some more of these types of books targeted towards younger folks, though, because I did enjoy the ones that I read, and I really don't mind if I'm not exactly the target audience, because I think they can be really enjoyable regardless. All right, so that is my high-level recap and stats. I'm going to wrap this part of the video up right now, And I'll be back soon with part 2, which is going to be the disappointments of 2020. Thanks for watching. Bye, and happy reading.